Mata Hari. Just hearing the name, right? It paints a picture. A seductive, deadly femme fatale. The ultimate spy. But what if I told you that the most famous female spy in history wasn't actually a spy at all? What if her whole story, the one we all think we know, was just one of the most cynical frame-ups ever? Well, today, we're going to unravel the tragic truth behind that very powerful myth.
So, our story actually starts at the very end. I want you to picture this. It's a cold, damp morning, October 15th, 1917, at a military fortress just outside Paris. The air is just heavy, and a 41-year-old woman, the world-famous dancer we know as Mata Hari, is being led from her cell to face a firing squad.
They offer her a blindfold? She says no. Can you imagine? She just stares down the barrels of 12 rifles with this unbelievable composure. An observer there said she settled to her knees with her head up always. It was this single act, this moment of defiance, that really sealed the deal. It cemented her image as a fearless super spy. But the real story of how she ended up there? It's so much more complicated.
And that really gets to the heart of it all. On one hand, you've got the myth, this cunning femme fatale, a spy who supposedly caused thousands of deaths. But then, there's the reality. A desperate, probably pretty ineffective woman who became the perfect political scapegoat. So, that's our job today. Let's separate the fiction from the cold, hard facts.
Okay, so to really get why Mata Hari was executed, we have to rewind. We need to go back and understand the woman she was before she ever became a famous dancer. We need to meet Margareta Zell, because her story truly is all about survival. Yeah, so that whole exotic princess from Java thing, totally made up for the stage. The real person was Margareta Zell. She was born in the Netherlands in 1876 into a pretty normal, comfortable middle-class family. For a while, her life was, completely ordinary.
But then, things just started to fall apart. It was one tragedy after another, relentlessly. Her dad went bankrupt and the family just shattered. Then her mother died. She tried to escape by getting married, but it was to an abusive officer twice her age. It was a disaster. And then, the unthinkable. Her infant son died under really tragic circumstances. And the final blow? She gets divorced, she's left with nothing, and she's forced to give up her only daughter. Just gone.
You have to understand this part because it's absolutely crucial for everything that comes next. I mean, think about it. She's been stripped of her family, her money, her reputation, even her children. Every single thing she does from this point on is driven by one thing and one thing only: a desperate need to survive financially. And back then, a woman in her position had so few options.
So what does she do? She moves to Paris with basically nothing to her name, and she just invents a whole new person. Mata Hari, the exotic Javanese princess. And here's the brilliant part. Striptease was illegal, right? But she framed her performance as a sacred religious dance. And just like that, an illegal act becomes celebrated high art. It was genius. From there, she became a famous courtesan, finally gaining that financial independence by attracting the wealthiest, most powerful men in Europe.
So she'd done it. Against all odds, she had survived. She'd built this incredible, independent life for herself. But then, World War I breaks out, and a passionate, maybe foolish love affair is about to pull her right out of the world of dance halls and into the deadly game of international espionage.
Now, you might think the reason she got into spying was for money or maybe some political reason. But no, the real catalyst, it was love. At 40 years old, she fell head over heels for a 21-year-old Russian captain named Vadim Maslov. And when he was badly wounded in battle, her one and only goal was to get to his side.
Here's the problem, though. Maslov was in a restricted military zone, so she couldn't just go visit him. She needed a special permit. So who does she go to? The head of French intelligence, a guy named Captain Georges Ledoux. Now, Ledoux sees this famous courtesan who travels all over Europe and knows all these powerful men, and he sees an opportunity. He makes her an offer: spy for France, and I'll give you 1 million francs. And for her, desperate to see her lover, it probably seems simple. She likely thought, hey, I can handle these guys. I'll play the game, get my money, and get to my man.
This was a fatal miscalculation. She was so naive about the world she was stepping into. I mean, the actual spies, the professionals over at Britain's MI5, they took one look at her and basically said she was an ineffective amateur. She thought her fame and her charm made her untouchable. But to these hardened intelligence agencies, She was just a pawn on the board, and a disposable one at that.
Okay, and this brings us to the really critical part, the political situation in 1917. Because if you want to understand how she was convicted on evidence that was, frankly, paper thin, you have to get this one thing. France wasn't just looking for a spy. They desperately needed a villain.
The timing here is just everything. Look at 1917. France had just been through the absolute catastrophe of Verdun. Then came the Nivelle Offensive, another total disaster. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of casualties. The French army was literally mutinying. Morale across the entire country had hit rock bottom. The government was desperate to find someone, anyone, to blame, to distract the public. And what do you know? Mata Hari's arrest and trial happened to line up perfectly with this massive national crisis.
So, what was the official charge they leveled against her? Get this. They claimed her spying led to the deaths of 50,000 French soldiers. 50,000! That number wasn't based on any evidence. It was pure propaganda. A huge, shocking figure designed to give the public a simple answer for their suffering and to justify executing this big, famous traitor.
Which leads us to the big question, right? Was there any real proof she was actually responsible for any of this? Well, the short answer is no. Not only was there no proof, the evidence they did use was deliberately manufactured.
She was basically caught in this incredibly cynical trap set by both sides. Here's how it worked. First, the Germans, who thought she was a useless spy anyway, decided to burn her. They sent coded messages about their Agent H21, her code name, but they used a code that they knew the French had already broken. They basically handed her over. Then her own French handler, Captain Ledoux, intercepts these messages, and instead of clearing her, he uses them against her. He manipulates the evidence, and this is the key. He completely hides the fact that she was supposed to be working for France all along. She was well and truly framed.
Her trial was a total sham. It was a military court, and the prosecution barely talked about evidence. Instead, they just attacked her character, her lifestyle as a courtesan. It was a trial of her morals, not her actions. And that's when she came out with that legendary line. A harlot? Yes, but a traitoress? Never. It was her final act of defiance, calling them out for judging her lifestyle instead of the facts.
And then came the final, most personal betrayal. The man she had risked absolutely everything for, her young lover, Captain Maslow, he refused to testify for her. He just abandoned her. Can you imagine? The entire reason she'd gotten into this mess was gone. At that point, there was nothing left to fight for. The only thing she had any control over was how she was going to die.
You'd think the story ends there, with the execution. But it doesn't. What happened after she died is maybe even more chilling. It reveals how the state went one step further, to erase not just her life, but her entire identity.
After she was executed, nobody came for her. No family, no friends, no one claimed her body. She was completely and utterly alone, right to the very end.
So as was the procedure for unclaimed bodies of executed prisoners, her body was sent to the Paris Museum of Anatomy. It was just donated to science for medical students to study. Think about that. Her body, the very thing that made her famous, the tool of her survival, was now just a specimen, an object.
And then, this is where it gets really, really weird. Years later, someone went looking for her remains in the museum's archives, and they were gone. Her preserved head, her body, all of it, vanished. It's like the real woman, Margarita Zell, was physically erased from history, leaving only the powerful myth of Mata Hari.
All of which leaves us with this one big question to think about. Her story is such a powerful and tragic reminder of how easily a real person can be twisted into a symbol to serve a political purpose. It really makes you ask, when a country is in crisis, when history needs a villain, who gets chosen to pay the price?